You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 95 Podcast. This is Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network, and you're listening to the very first podcast of 2025, which is hard to believe. And to be honest, I'm really glad 2024 is over because it was a hard year for me and Gina as we built our house and continued to work with 95 Network and do all that we did. And I'm actually recording. This is the very first podcast I've recorded in the new home, and I'm pretty excited about that. Got with me today one of our 95 Network teammates, Joseph Bennett. Joseph, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Dale. How's it going? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, man. We're literally recording this on the 2nd of January.
It's
It is the
crazy.
new. I told Gina, actually, I prayed last night when we ate supper. I said, Lord, thank you so much for this new year. It's been awesome.
Yes, this is the best year
I
yet.
said, this is the best year yet. Just finished one day.
That's right. Yes, totally.
Oh Lord, but I know everybody's kind of getting back in the groove, and having the holiday on a Wednesday is just that's brutal because who wants to go back and work 2 days and then get two more, get the weekend. So I imagine a lot of folks just went ahead and took Thursday and Friday off as well. So anyway, what I want to do today is this is the new year, and I thought, who could I talk to kind of help pastors and leaders set up for a new year and to lead their organizations well. And you're the first person I thought of.
Wow.
And that, I mean,
You
that's
dug,
pretty good, huh? I
you,
mean, I could have
you,
thought a
you
lot of.
dug the, you dug the bottom of the barrel,
Well,
man.
it was you or John Maxwell, and I thought I'd just call
Oh,
you.
okay. I'm honored for sure.
Well, yeah, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek because a lot of the wonderful principles that I learned from John Maxwell and other great national leaders like that, I tend to feel I guess a resistance a lot of times from smaller church leaders to that stuff, and I think it's because it's all presented in a larger fashion. And so we tend to, or at least I did, we tend to in the small church setting to just kind of reject anything that it makes us feel like we need to step up our game a little bit. And so today I want to kind of talk about some practical ways that we can do that. But before we do that, I want you to dive in and just kind of share your story. You've been on the podcast before, but it's been a while. We worked together when you were in missions. And so I want you to kind of just tell your story, from the youth pastor to the missionary to what you're doing now. And then we're just going to walk through some leadership ideas today.
Yeah, well, man, it's an honor to be on here. I'm excited to talk to pastors and leaders. And, for me, Dale, I've been in ministry now. I'm 37, been in ministry since I was like 17. So it's been a while. I've learned a lot of bruises and scars and
Mhm.
all those things along the way, as you know, and we've talked about before. So it's great to be on here. But yeah, so I served as a youth pastor, student pastor for about 10 years. And then God called my family and I to the mission field in Honduras. We went there and helped plant a church. And then I became our national director and oversaw around 150 churches there and helped pastors and leaders, trying to equip them in leadership and different things like that, coach them. And then at the end of 2021, I believe it was, we started feeling the call back to the U.S. To come and serve in a church here in South Carolina to help launch a campus for that church. And we have been on staff there since March of 22. And last fall, I became our executive pastor. So I oversee our staff and our operations, and we've got 3 campuses. So, man, it's exciting. 3 kids, and we just found out we've got another one on the way. So It's 2025's,
Congratulations.
yeah, 2025's gearing up to be interesting as well.
Mhm. Well, for some of the folks know you and know that Rebecca went through a real bad health scare last year. Kind of update us on her too, for those who already know you.
Yeah, yeah. So, April last year, the day of the eclipse here in South Carolina, she, started slurring her words. I was on the way home from work. She went unconscious after that for 8 days in the hospital.
Hmm.
Was transferred from a hospital in the upstate of South Carolina to Charleston, South Carolina, to in the highest level ambulance, was put on a ventilator, and then miraculously woke up 8 days later with no memory of anything. And she's been doing therapy twice a week. She was on a no driving, regimen for 6 months. But man, I just give credit to God. He still works miracles, seriously, because there was a time, Dale, where I had called my parents and I said, I think I'm going to have to tell their kids they don't have a mom anymore.
Yeah.
It was scary, scary time. But we have gone back to MUSC since then, and they told us that it looks like Rebecca's recovery has gone so well. She is where someone should be a year from this happening to a year and a half from this happening. So she's been healing up really well. Even we didn't know kids was in the picture for us again, and another pregnancy. So we didn't think that was possible. God does still work miracles, I guess. And
There's so
but
many questions with that.
yes, yes. Well, we'll just leave it there. But
Yeah, I know.
the crazy thing about it is, what the doctor told us is that, what it means is that God has healed her body even more.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that even though she almost lost her life, now she's carrying another life. Just shows, God can still work miracles, man. It's amazing.
Did you
So,
ever figure out what happened? I mean, what does anybody know what they ever diagnose what happened to her?
yeah,
Literally, you were driving home from work and she was just like not
yeah,
well, and then
out
yeah,
of it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they just said, it's encephalitis, which was swelling of the brain. They think it might have been related to she had a stomach virus a couple
Mhm.
days earlier, but we still don't have a clue. So that's
Wow.
kind of the weird part about
Yeah,
it.
man. Well, it shows you the uncertainty of life, and if there's anything that we all learn as we get older, you need to value every day, because I mean,
Absolutely.
you just don't. I mean, like just last year in February, my son-in-law's mother passed at
Yeah.
63, and it was just, I did her funeral, and then many of our listeners know that Tony Morgan of
That's
the
right.
Unstuck group passed yeah, the day he had a heart attack on Labor Day. And a lot of folks don't know this, but I was actually scheduled to record a podcast with him the next day, and then he passed the day after that. So we obviously I never got to talk to him again, but that was really wild. Here at our local radio station in the upstate of South Carolina, on one of the a long time staffers there, Rob Dempsey, passed away this year. He was a young guy so you just you don't want to be morbid. I don't think it's you don't want to be that way, but you do, and you don't need to spend all your time focusing on, the negatives of life, but you do need to live your life to the fullest. And I
Right.
really, that's what a lot of why I wanted to have you on and have this conversation today. One of the things that I began to dive into when I pastored a small church many years ago was I just devoured everything that came out from John Maxwell, Bill Hybels back in the day, some of the church growth people, and of course, now we look at some of that stuff and realize that some of the not anybody specifically that I just said, but some of the principles, I don't know if they were flawed or if we just took them wrong. But you got this mentality that if I do A, then I'm gonna have this big church. And that was the goal. And in fact, what kind of defined you was, if your church wasn't, booming and growing, and people used to say this all of the time. Well, healthy things grow, healthy things grow. And it was like, okay, well, my church isn't growing, so it must be unhealthy. Well, I've learned since then, I never make that comment that healthy things grow, because you know what? Unhealthy things grow too.
Right. Yeah.
And
Weeds grow. That's right.
weeds grow, cancer grows, blight on crops grows, and so that mentality, just I internalized it. I internalized it, and here I am. I'm trying to learn all this stuff about leadership. I'm trying to implement all these things that people are saying, and it didn't work for me. I always describe it this way. So I remember probably when I started the church, we had 30 people, and it grew from 30 to 300. And then we had a split in the 8th year, and it went back down to 150. And then in the 12th year, we closed it because it was so unhealthy, and I was unhealthy. And then, a couple of years later, or that led to which this has been a while now, but I had open heart surgery because of stress, basically. And so, but I remember I had about 7 focused areas of the church. So as a pastor, we had the children's ministry, the youth ministry, groups, and just education, all that different stuff. And so here we are. And so I'm pointing, raising up, training, pouring into people, trying to get them to head up these areas of ministry so that I can continue to lead from a visionary perspective. And the way I describe it is, it was like, the spinning the plates on the pole, you see people who can spin all those plates. And so here I am. And I'm like, I'd get 6 plates spinning. And when I start the 7th plate, it's like guy number 1 would drop his plate, so I'd come hang out with him. So I'd run over there and help that person, and then plate number 5 would drop, and so so it was like I never could raise up people to hand things off to that they would keep it going because they all wanted to be my buddy. So they all wanted to hang out with me. Some of them we deer hunted together, some of them we did lots. And I'm not saying that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing life together with your people. But I could not make that transition where I could pour things in. And in looking back now, sometimes I think the problem was I was too much of a perfectionist. I know you can't identify with that at all.
Never. What are you talking about? Yeah.
But I just feel like it may be because they didn't do it perfectly, or maybe because they didn't do it the way I would have done it. I'll give you a great example, and I've shared this one on the podcast before, but it's who I was. So I had we had these burgundy stack chairs. One of my shocks in life was discovering how much chairs cost. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I was going to buy all these chairs. I'm like, I'll never raise that much money. So all we could do was go to Sam's Club and buy the burgundy stack chairs, and that's what we had. And I would spend hours, Joseph, I'm not exaggerating. I spent hours each week making sure those chairs were perfectly lined up, that I'd get the angles right, and they were connected right. And I spent all this time on those chairs, just total obnoxious, just waste of time doing that. And so I had this couple come up to me and say, "Hey, Pastor, look, we know you spent all this time, straightening up the chairs and stuff. We'll be glad to do that for you if you'll let us do it." And I knew the Lord wanted me to do that, so I let it go. I let them start doing the chairs. And 2 or 3 weeks later, they came to me and they said, "We quit." And I'm going, "Why do you quit?" They said, "Because you go behind us and you redo them." I'm going, "Yeah, you're exactly right." So I gave them the chairs. And the point of that story is it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so there are some hills to die on, and I believe that as a leader. But man, some of the things that we get hung up on keep our church from growing because we won't release people to do things because we have a certain way we want it done. And if it's not my way, it becomes the highway. So did that prompt any thoughts in your mind right there? That little bit of diatribe?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought about, one of the things we tell our team all the time is, like I thought about you talking about the chairs. That's such a reality for many pastors and many leaders. It may not be the chairs. It may be, well, I have to move this, or I have to set this up, or this has to look right on the screen, or whatever it may be, when there's other people that maybe can do it better than you actually.
Yep.
But the thing I thought about, Dale, is like what we tell our staff and our team is people over task. You as the lead pastor and the shepherd of that church at the time, you were spending your time invested in, let me move these chairs around, when you needed to be with those people.
Yep.
Talking to those people, caring for those people, shepherding those people. Someone else can set those chairs up, and that brings them joy.
Mm-hmm.
They have a purpose. in God's, church, in his kingdom. And you're preparing an atmosphere for people to come and worship. So that's exactly what I thought about. I had one of our associate pastors last week. Our church meets in a high school, so we're set up and tear down every week. We don't have to set up chairs because we use an auditorium.
Yeah.
But we set up all the Christmas stuff every week and took it down every week. To prepare people to celebrate Christmas there in that high school. And when you walk into a school, there's one thing about it. It looks like a school. It doesn't
Yes,
look
it
like a
does.
church.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to create an atmosphere that's inviting and, people would enjoy especially during Christmas time. And last week, the service had ended, kind of last Sunday of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We are getting ready we know after everybody leaves, the guests are gone, we're going to, pack everything up in the trailer. And one of my associate pastors, he starts immediately after the service heading towards the trailer to grab the trailer and, start packing it up. And I said, wait, hey, come right back here for a second. He said, what? He said, man, I just need to get the trailer because we got to get this stuff out of here. And I said, hey, stop for a second. People over task. There's going to be people that walk by you before they
Mm-hmm.
go to their car. They're wanting you to speak to them.
Yep.
And they want to hear from you. And you have an opportunity to pray for them and all of that. And it was just a great moment, for him to realize, okay, these people are more important than this task I'm about
Did he
to
get it?
try to accomplish. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Okay, good. See, one of the things that I don't know how to really say the impact of this in I want to say it in a nice way. But one of the things that has really been mind-boggling for me over the last few years as we have done conferences and we've done the things that we do at 95 Network, trying to help small and mid-sized church leaders, the number one excuse we have for people not engaging is that they're too busy. They're too busy. They're too busy. Now, my question often is, doing what? And I would have been one of those pastors probably who would have said, yeah, man, I'd like to come to that, but I'm too busy. What do you got to do? Well, I got to straighten the chairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that this year specifically, we can really help pastors and leaders hone in on learning how to cut away the things that are really not productive. And here's the thing. So one of our realizations of where we are today and what I think is going to be in the future is many pastors are going to be bivocational. If they're not already, they're going to be bivocational, and that's not a negative thing. But here's the tension that a bivocational pastor has. They often feel like they still have to work 40 hours a week at the church, though they're part-time, and they still have another 40-hour-a-week job. And what we're telling them is you can't do that. Your health is going to be sacrificed, your marriage is going to be sacrificed, your family is going to be sacrificed. Something's going to pay the price because there's only so many hours in the day, and you do have to sleep sometime. And so what you've got to learn how to do is you've got to learn how to evaluate what's valuable, what's important, what's priority. And then some of the things that you're doing, you just can't do. And I know that's hard to hear, but one of our things that we often see with smaller churches is they try to offer all the same things, all the same ministries, all the same resources that larger churches have. And one, God doesn't expect them to do that. And two, you can't do that. You don't have the people, the resources, the space, none of that. And so what happens to you is you get so caught up in the cycle of busy that you start, you just do a lot of things that probably you shouldn't be doing or what's not important. You told me as we talked off mic the other day that you're actually working through a leadership book right now. Kind of dive into that book a little bit for me.
Yeah. It's a book called Leadership Pain. And, the interesting thing is, Dale, that I think exactly what you said is we all, we hope that our churches will grow. We hope that they'll be booming, all of that. And then when they're not, we feel inadequate or we feel like we don't add any
Stalled.
value. Yeah, we feel stalled. Exactly. And we don't, we might feel like we're inadequate to contribute to God's kingdom. And that's not always the case. There's obviously, I think we should always be trying to grow as leaders and all of these things. But the truth of it is kind of even what that book talks about is that ministry is difficult.
Yeah.
Is I mean, the interesting thing I love about the book is it starts off with a story from Craig Groeschel, and he starts off and he talks about how when he first started, Life Church, how there was people that were friends that he hired, and he ended up quickly having to fire them,
Mm-hmm.
and stories of betrayal and
Mm-hmm.
disappointment and depression and all of these type things. And it's like, I think that a lot of times what I'm seeing is leaders, especially that I've been working with too, is they go into ministry, or people are interested in ministry and they have rose-colored glasses on.
Yeah.
And I want to say this to our listeners: ministry is one of the most rewarding jobs there is. I
Yep.
mean, there is amazing moments where you see truly people's lives change. I mean, we got a guy that started coming to our church, he and his family, and it's interesting. They went to high school with me, and they
Hmm.
started coming to our church, and I literally would have said, this family would never come to church, and now they're in church. And at our 1 year anniversary, their 16-year-old son gave his life to Jesus.
Wow.
And that whole family pretty much since then has been baptized and
So
dove
cool.
in, and they're serving in our church. That's the highlight of ministry, right?
Yep.
There's nothing better than that. That's the juice, as we would say. But what's hard, I think, for a lot of leaders is we get into ministry and things get hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's be honest, it's work. Not every day we get up and it's like, oh, this is always, we're on cloud nine. There's work that needs to be done.
Yep.
And there's things that need to be done, and there's difficulties that happens in people's life. I mean, you think about, for us as shepherds and leaders, you can be on the phone with somebody who's calling you and telling you, I got accepted to this college, and this is amazing news. And then the phone call rings again, and I'm having a baby. Oh, that's exciting. And then the phone rings again. Oh, we're getting married. Another phone call. But then after that, you get a phone call of, oh, my son was killed in a car wreck.
Yep.
Or, oh, my mom has cancer. All of that can happen in one day.
It can happen 1 hour.
In 1 hour in the life of a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're literally on this roller coaster all the time. And I think that a lot of leaders enter ministry or get interested in ministry going, this is going to be, a walk in the park. And the truth is like, I believe, for one, that there's a battle going on, that there's a true enemy out there that hates what we stand for and wants to kill, steal, and destroy us, as the Bible talks about. He's roaming around like a
Mm-hmm.
lion, seeking who he wants to devour, and that's us as ministry leaders. He wants to attack our marriages and our families and our kids and all of those things. But what happens is we realize that, what, you've heard, no pain, no gain, so to
Yep.
speak. That anytime that we grow, it's a shaping and a molding, and it's a painful process.
Mm-hmm.
Dale, I think about your book Stalled and all the things you've gone through. Those things shaped you into who you are today as a leader.
Yeah,
Through
they beat the snot out of me.
exactly, and some of it is good, and some of it's bad. But
Yeah.
I think on the backside of it now, you go, man, you know what? If I hadn't have gone through that, I couldn't speak into pastors' lives like I can now.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing with that book is that even though you went through that pain, God is using it for His glory. And when you can realize that when you go through the pain, that growth will come.
Yep.
You embrace the pain more than resist it. Because I think what a lot of leaders want to do is, oh, well, this is painful, this is not easy as I thought, I'll just quit.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the enemy wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
He wants you to get out. He wants you to quit. And I've noticed just through my own ministry, the more times I've just kept walking and kept growing and going through this pain, growth has happened. Just like, you go and work out, you lift weights, you tear those muscles down. Well, you're tearing them down so then they can build back up and grow again. That's what's happening, when we go through those leadership pains. So, man, that book's really spoke to me. And I just hope that, leaders will realize that, yeah, I mean, there's going to be some painful times, but the other thing is you're not alone as a leader.
That's right.
We here at 95 Network, we want to help you. Dale, you talk to pastors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is that you're not alone. God's not left you. He's not forsaken you. He sees you. He knows what you're going through. But I would encourage any of our listeners, pastors, leaders, whatever position, role you're in, to get somebody that you can talk to outside of your church.
Yeah.
That you can lean into and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Maybe it's a counselor. We brought several staff members on at our church, and when we hire them, part of their package is we're going to put you in counseling. And they're,
We'd all sign up
some
for
of
that.
them, yeah, and some of them are like, well, I don't know that anything's wrong with me, and we're like, well, we're not
find
saying
out.
there is, yeah, but we want you to be healthy.
Yeah.
And there's, I think that's the older mindset is, well, if you go to counseling, that's because you just need to pray more.
Yeah,
you need to rebuke the devil more. And it's like, man, it's a great way for you to unpack some stuff that may be buried deep down.
That's right. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. I'm going to tell you a story of when I was kind of in one of those down times, and I had a mentor give me some great advice. So short break. We'll be right back. Back here with Joseph Bennett, hanging out, talking leadership and just practical things that we deal with in the church world. I was kind of in one of those situations, Joseph. The early years of our ministry of Gina and I, the first 10 years we were married, we had a Christian music groups that we worked with. We're on the road. And we did 1,100 concerts the first 10 years we were married all over the country. And back then, Christian music was just, a big thing. So that's what we did. And really thought we were going to do that the rest of our lives. And I remember I have a dear, dear friend who's a great mentor of mine. His name is Roger Breland, who led a group called Truth back in the day. And he would, whenever he was in town, I'd always go hang out with him. And man, I was so discouraged this one time. And I didn't, I didn't know what to do. And he actually what I did was I called him. This is pre-cell phone. So he didn't have a cell phone with him, and so I remember we were broke. We couldn't get bookings. Things were bad. It was a difficult time. I'm still in my 20s, okay? And so I called up and I left a message on this thing called an answer machine. You ever heard of one of those? He had an answer machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I called it because he's on the road. I just don't even expect him to get my message at all. And so I called up and I left a message. And here's what I said I said, hey, Mr. Breland, this is Dale. I said, man, I'm just so discouraged. Call me back if you care. And hung up. And to my surprise, he called back later that same day, that evening. He happened to be home when I called. And he called. He said, man, what's wrong with you? I said, man, this is awful. This is awful. I need some help. He said, what's wrong? I said, well, we can't. We're broke. We're not bringing enough money. We can't. Our ministry's not being that impactful right now. I said, how do you know when it's time to quit? And I'll never forget this. As long as I live, I'll share the story. He goes, well, he said, Dale, he said, did Jesus tell you to start? I said, yes, sir. He said, did Jesus tell you to stop? I said, no, sir. He said, do you want to honor Jesus with your life? I said, yes, sir. He says, well, it sounds to me like you're just going to have to tough it out, man. If Jesus didn't tell you to quit and he told you to start and you want to honor him, because if you quit today, you'll have to start back at some point down the road to find peace, and you'll be way, way, way further behind than you are today. And
Yeah.
Joseph, that little bit of advice is why I'm sitting here today. Because there was,
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, I'm the guy who asked the question to, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Well, I didn't ask that because I thought you wouldn't fail. Obviously, we're going to fail at times, but the reason I asked that question is because I want to know, what's the dream in your heart? See,
Yeah.
if you know the dream in your heart and you know what you're called to do, that's what pulls you through when difficult times come. Obviously, there's difficult times. Everybody's got them. And then, and I think it's fair to say we are dealing with some things in ministry on this side of the pandemic that we have not dealt with before. And I think it's left a lot of folks just going, I don't know which way to turn and what to do. But if you know your calling, you're anchored in that calling, You want to honor Jesus and what he called you to do with your life. You want to stay on point with that. Sometimes, and look, I'll be honest with you, Joseph. Sometimes it's just a matter of just putting something over your face and just let the storm blow by. I'm
Yeah.
not saying we
Yeah.
do it perfect, it's difficult. You went through lots of difficulties in Honduras down there.
Yeah.
I came to be with you some, and we stayed in touch, and then what you just went through with your family. That's
Yeah.
life. That's
Yeah.
life. What advice do you give folks who are like, man, how do I know if it's time to give up?
Yeah, the interesting thing I shared with our staff not too long ago in one of our staff meetings was, we have a staff value that's break the barrier, and it's, hey, I'm going to continue to give, get 1% better and give as much effort as I can,
Hmm.
and we're saying that is like we're not saying kill yourself, right? We're
No.
saying, but give work hard, give as much as you can, because we're working at whatever we do, we're working for the Lord, as the Bible says. So
Hmm.
I gave this staff talk about how, what do you do? How do you break the barrier without breaking you? And I talked about how, Dale, we always talk about as ministry leaders, we should, think outside the box. We hear that, creative thinking. If this is what the
Hmm.
norm is, we got to think outside the box.
Yep.
And I made this little box I took my kids' toys to work. It was awesome. And I built this little box out of Magna tiles, this little square cube. And I said, but what do you do when you're told think outside the box? And I smacked the box off the table and it shatters on the ground. I said, when the box as you know it is gone, there is no box.
Hmm.
And what I was talking about is the norm in your life. And that's literally what happened to me this past
Yep.
year.
Hmm.
Prior to what happened to with me and my wife and her health journey and all that, I felt like as a leader, and I'm not saying this arrogantly, but I felt like I had a really good rhythm. I was, taking care of things. Things were getting done. Our church was growing. All of this, I felt like I was being a good husband, being a good father. All of that, I felt like I'm firing on all cylinders. But then life just
Blew up.
crashed, and it was not anything I could control. It's not anything we even thought would be coming.
Let me say this
It
too. It's
happened.
not anything you did wrong.
Exactly.
I
It
mean,
happened out of
that's my
nowhere.
natural thing. It's like, well, I must have done something.
Yeah, yeah, it happened out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So when the box is gone, how do we keep going?
Yeah.
And what it caused me to do, Dale, was reevaluate how I'm doing ministry. And I realized that a lot of leaders, myself included, is if you are a perfectionist, I think like you and I are, Dale,
Hmm.
there's a lot of those out there listening. That you think, well, nobody can do it better than me. But there are people that are, you've got to call them off the bench. One of the things I tell our team all the time is, guys, we don't say no for people. You have not because you ask not. And
Yep.
when you ask somebody, you don't ask them from this posture of, well, would you, because I need, and maybe might you, and it's kind of this meek thing. No, you're inviting, guys, you're inviting them to God's purpose.
Yep.
You're inviting them to, you need to know, they need to understand their why behind the what. What are you
Yes.
wanting them to do? And the why is that, hey, by you do this, you're going to help people learn how to find Jesus, learn how to follow Jesus, learn how to walk with Jesus. And, they're going to meet Jesus. Their lives are going to be changed because of what you're doing for him.
Yeah.
That's what I told one of our staff members, I said, invite people to a journey and a purpose, not a problem.
There you go.
Because when you're inviting them to a problem, who wants, Dale, I got enough problems. How about
Everybody's got
you?
their own problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not looking for more problems. But if you're saying, hey, I've got something that, man, I really think that if you would be a part of it, it's going to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. Well, now I'm leaning in and I'm listening.
Yeah.
And we as ministry leaders, we've got to realize that our greatest resource is, yes, we're busy. Yes, we've got a lot going on, but we've got to invite people to the party. And our greatest resource is the people that God has put before us.
That's so good.
I mean, I think about, I'm sitting here, looking at the word Ephesians 4, that we are to do these things, that we're to, invite people to the work of the ministry. It says this, Ephesians 4:11. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers to do what? To equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. That's what we're supposed to do.
That's
You and
the
I, we're
calling.
supposed to give away the ministry.
That's the
And
calling.
when we don't give it away, we're robbing people of their purpose in serving in God's kingdom.
Mm.
And what I would say is, shame on us as Christian leaders for holding all of God's ministry to ourselves.
Yep.
And when we're doing that, no wonder we're stressed out. No wonder we're burning out and all of these things, because we haven't utilized the greatest resource that God has given to us. It's his people.
That's what we're called to do. That's like, again, that's the foundational scripture for 95 Network is Ephesians 4, because
yes,
and I think we can say it this way now, because I think it's people understand what I mean by this. But the American model of the way we do church it's broken, and honestly, it's a lot of it's not even biblical. I mean, it's our calling is not to just teach. Teaching is part of what we do. Preaching is part of what we do. But as you just read, I mean, you can't refute this. What you just read is our calling. If we are called, is to equip people. And if you read on in those verses 13, 14, 15, and 16, it tells you what will happen when the ministry gifts equip people. It teaches us in verse 13 we're going to have maturity. In verse 14, we're going to have stability. In verse 15, we're going to have integrity. And then in verse 16, we're going to have community. And it literally says at the end of verse 16 that the body edifies itself. It causes itself to grow. And I don't think that's just numerically. I think it grows in discipleship. It grows in maturity. It grows in wisdom. But it does grow. It does grow numerically, because I think today specifically, if we will create a healthy church, and I don't care if your church is 10 or 10,000, if we will make it an effort to be an equipper and to grow a healthy church, people in our communities are looking for answers. I don't know if there's ever been much easier time to get people to hear the gospel, because they're looking for answers right now. They're tired of social media. They're tired of the politicians. They're tired of the media. There's nothing. Most of us don't trust anything we hear. And another angle that I want to present too with this particular thought is we have a mutual friend, Clayton King, and Clayton King and I were talking a couple of years ago. This was toward the end of the year. A couple of years ago, Clayton and I were talking, and he was talking about how you don't verbalize this, but it's kind of like almost a little disappointed that Jesus hadn't done something specific for him. And he said he was praying about it, and he just heard the Lord say to him, "Well, you never asked me to do that." I'll never forget that, as long because God used that to deal with me about some stuff. It's like, oh, God, I'm a little disappointed here because you haven't come through. And it's like, well, you didn't ask me. You haven't asked me to do that. And I think about all those scriptures in the New Testament, and this is not the prosperity stuff, but it's just the reality that Jesus said, if you ask, you'll receive. If you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will be open. And he said, you don't have because you don't ask. So if we're equipping people and then we're asking Jesus, that's a recipe for a healthy church. Because here's the reality. He's not sitting on his throne in heaven going, you know what? I don't want to bless those people. I don't want that church to grow. I don't want that church to grow. That's not who he is. Because he knows if the church is healthy and it's growing, it's reaching people.
Yeah. Two things came to mind as you said that, if it's okay to say this. One is something that actually Clayton said to me, I'll never forget. And I think this is important for our listeners on this topic. He said, if you don't feel like you want to quit about every other Monday, you're probably not doing something right.
There you go.
and I was like, that's a great truth there, because we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Those feelings are going to happen. But the second thing is what you said is, well, have you even asked God yet for whatever you need? Have you put the vision before him? The Bible talks about write out the vision. Mm-hmm. I talked to a worship pastor the other week. He's bivocational. And their church is about 8 years old. And he said when he first started, he said, I know I'm not the greatest vocal leader, like singer, but he plays acoustic guitar. And he said, when I first started, he said, man, it was just me. I'm up on stage with my guitar. And he said, I just started praying, God, send us people, send
Yes.
us musicians, send us people to play instruments. 8 years later, I preached at their church back in September of this past year. He's got a full band up there. And if you looked at the stage, you would not even know that he's the worship pastor because he's got other people out front leading the service entirely.
Yep.
He's just back there playing his guitar.
He
And I just
equipped.
thought that is a perfect example.
He
He
equipped.
prayed them in and he equipped them.
Yep.
I mean, and people are looking for, well, what's the secret sauce of how I can grow my church? Well, you see all these ads on internet and Facebook and all these things of, we're all looking for the silver bullet. The silver bullet is, Ephesians 4, you equip
Yes.
the people
Yes.
for the work of the ministries. Here's what I know for sure. If you equip and, basically send out more volunteers, your church will grow. Grow your volunteers and your church will grow. It just happens.
Yes.
It happens. I remember hearing a story this past year of a youth pastor who he had heard that about his student ministry. Somebody challenged him. They said, well, if you grow your volunteer team, your student ministry will grow. And he was like, oh, that's, whatever. That's malarkey kind of, I'm not doing that. Well, he picked up the challenge and he grew his volunteer team, and his student ministry basically doubled in size within like a year, just by growing his volunteers, because there was more people to invest in that ministry.
And Joseph did not just say, if you do this, then this will happen, because that is the
That's
American
right.
thing. Is what happened with that guy. It doesn't.
That's what happened with him.
You just do the right thing and leave the results to God. But the
That's
problem
right.
is, if we're not doing the right thing, then we can't get the results that the Lord wants us to get. There is a steps A and B to get to C. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Accept your calling, equip people, and then watch your church grow. And again, we want you to grow. Yes, we want you to grow numeric because you're reaching more people, but we also want you to grow in character. And one of the huge things we're going to focus on for a while now is just growing in discipleship, because so many churches talk about discipleship, but I don't know if they know what that means. I mean, it's what you've been talking about today is discipleship. Leadership development is discipleship. It's not a goal out there. It's to make people become the people God designed them to be, and that's our calling.
Yeah. It is, and sometimes we make discipleship so difficult that it's a scheduled program that happens on this night of the week at this time.
Yep.
We had a gentleman who, our campus that I serve at has been open now for 2 years, and we've been serving in the community in our town. And every time we would do a service project in the community, I'd see this young man, because he works for our town here, and like he's in public works. And I'd invite him and talk to him and all those things. Well, he just started coming to our church. He's basically been coming the last 6 weeks in a row. He's only missed one Sunday, and it's because he had to work on that Sunday. And the Sunday he missed, he actually texted me. But we took him out to lunch, and he admitted to us how he was struggling, with some different things in his life. And then we talked about, how he could read his Bible on the YouVersion app, and, building some accountability into his life. And this guy's like blown away. He's so hungry.
Yeah.
We don't have to make discipleship so difficult. Just spend time with people, point them to.
And it's just never been easier, whether you do it in person or you can do it. You can do it even on Zoom if you have to. There are just multiple ways today to connect with people if that's in your heart.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we're texting each other, hey, I read this, have you read this yet? Just a word of encouragement through a text message could be discipleship. We've got a great opportunity where, we talk about, well, I don't have much time, I'm so busy. Well, those things don't take a lot of time either.
No. And again, we have to prioritize people. If we're going to be effective in 2025, if we're ever going to be effective, we can't just keep going through the motions. And so if you're listening today and you're like, man, our ministry is stalled. We aren't growing. We're not baptizing people. We're maintaining. And one of the difficulties that we're dealing with today is the baby boomers are now, beginning to die off, but they're in charge. And so many of them, and that's my generation, so many of them just want to keep things the way they've been. And that's not working. So there are so many opportunities available. But as a leader, pastor, as a leader, you got to get that passion, that fire in your own belly, if you're going to see it happen in your people. Well, Joseph, we're kind of moving to the end of the podcast today here, so I want to ask you to do this. So today, maybe a pastor sits down with you, and he's, you guys are having a cup of coffee, and he's like, I want to get a fresh start for the year. I want to get a fresh start in my leadership. I want to get a fresh start in our church. What would you tell them to do?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would say is, I would ask them, Pastor, what does your time look like with God? Because if you've excluded God from, your life, if you're just, doing ministry and you're not spending time with the source of your ministry, then you're missing out. You can only lead on empty so long.
Yep.
You can only drive your car on empty for so long. So eventually, Pastor, things are going to start falling apart. So I just encourage you, hey, what does your time look like with God? And encourage you, get back in his word, not just to prep messages and sermons, but, go to that well, because it's a well that never runs dry. The second thing is, I'd ask, what kind of accountability do you have in your life? Who are you able to talk to? And I'm not talking about your spouse. I'm not talking about your co-leader at the church. I'm talking about maybe even another pastor from another church that you can lean on and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm let's be honest, I'm frustrated with this. I'd encourage you to do that, because it's a big help to you. I'd encourage you also to, prioritize time with your spouse. This past year really made me evaluate that, we don't know how much time we have with our significant other. So prioritize that as much as you can. And, spend time with your kids. Here's the thing. What I'm convinced of is what gets scheduled on our calendar gets done.
That's right.
So, put those for me, man, I'm putting, the date night on the calendar. I'm putting time with the kids on the calendar. I'm also putting, here's the budget meeting with my spouse on the calendar to get ready, for the next month and different things like that. So, yeah, those are things I'd prioritize. And then I just encourage you, Pastor, to, take a look at your volunteer structure at your church. Who are the leaders that you have in place? What are the things you're praying for? And present those things to God. The Bible talks about let our requests be known to God, right? Well, it's kind of like Dale said earlier, we're asking God to do things, or we're assuming, we've asked God to do things, and God's like, well, you've never asked me. And the truth is, we're in a relationship with him.
Yes.
He already knows, right? But he wants us to ask.
So he's a
father. Yeah, he's a good father. He wants to hear from us. So those are things that come to mind. And man, just equip your people.
Yeah.
If you need help with that, we're here to help you as well.
We are.
Because man, it's what I'm still seeing is that lives are being changed, that people are coming to know him. And I think that, people are hungry. As Dale said earlier, they're looking for answers, pastor and leader, and you have those answers, and what an exciting role to be in as one of God's leaders and God's shepherds over his body in the local church.
I've always believed passion is contagious, and so I'm expecting some people to get a big dose of it after listening to you today.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast, man. And I'll have your email in here, and I'm also going to put the link to the book you mentioned. If anybody wants to reach out to you, I'll have your email there. But man, thanks again for who you are, what you do, and I pray this will be the best year you've ever had in ministry.
Thanks, Dale. You too.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.